Comet The Colt of Steel, Chapter 6 The Pain of Loss. The rest of that night, I felt nothing. I don't know how long I just laid there, in the forest, crying my eyes out. Eventually, I just ran out of tears to cry. Bright Mac was gone, and it was all my fault. If I would have just listened to him, and gone back to the orchard, instead of running off to fight that Timberwolf, he would still be here. But I hadn't listened, and now he was dead. Once I managed to pull myself together, I realized I couldn't leave him here to be picked apart by the beasts of the forest. The only problem was, he was too big for me to carry him on my back, and I couldn't bring myself to just drag him through the woods by his tail or mane. After much thought, I found a way. Taking a deep breath, I covered him in a thick layer of ice. And hopefully, it would be enough to keep him safe until I came back. I took my time heading back to the orchard. I was in no mood to run. I didn't want to think about running for the rest of my life. What was I going to tell Granny and my siblings? My hooves felt heavier with each step I took back to the farm. The moon shone brightly in the night sky as I walked up the trail, the stars shimmering brightly in a tapestry of light. I thought back of what Javel and Lauren had said, that I was not a pony of this world, the last known survivor of a planet long gone. As I looked over my shoulder, I saw the town of Ponyville below. Its lights in the houses had long since dimmed. Everything seemed so peaceful, so tranquil. Tomorrow would just be another day for them, with kids headed off to school and grown-ups going to work. I was pretty certain that those other kids didn't have to deal with being an alien. What was I supposed to do on this world? Could I go back to school tomorrow, with everything that had happened? What if they thought I was a freak? What if I hurt someone? Would they run me out of town like a monster? To be honest, I kinda felt like one right then. The sign that traditionally hung over the gateway lay face down on the road in front of me. It had been torn from its screws by my wake when I ran out of the barn. Picking it up, I turned over to see the shiny bright green apple on the front coated in dirt. A reminder of all the damage I'd done so far. Suddenly, my ears perked up at the sound of voices coming from the house.
Are Pa and Apple Comet gonna be okay, Granny?
The voice was distant, but I instantly recognized it as Apple Bloom. Looking through the walls, I saw the rest of the family sitting in the living room. Granny was in her usual rocking chair with Apple Bloom sitting worriedly in her lap. Applejack and Big Mac sat on the sofa staring at the clock on the wall.
I'm sure they'll be fine, Apple Bloom. Your pa's as strong as an oak tree from what I saw today. Your brother might even be stronger than that.
Granny's tone was reassuring, but shaky. From the clock on the wall, I could see it was more than 2 hours after I'd left. Instantly, I felt my stomach sink. I thought about what Granny and Applejack would say when they found out, but Apple Bloom? How was I supposed to tell her that Pa was never coming home, and that it was all thanks to my recklessness? I looked down at the broken sign in my hooves. I sighed deeply. I was gonna have to do this sooner or later. I set the sign down by the fence and walked up to the front door.
That must be them now,
Applejack said as she got up to answer the door. Big Mac and Apple Bloom were right behind her, with Granny trailing behind. The door swung open and I was greeted with a group hug from my siblings.
Apple Comet!
Applejack exclaimed as she pulled me into a hug.
Thank Celeste y'all right. Y'all had us worried sick about ya.
Tears of relief ran down her muzzle onto my back.
Where's Pa? Where's Pa?
Apple Bloom asked, looking up at me with concern in her eyes.
He went out looking for ya.
What little self-composure I'd gathered on my long walk home shattered on the floor. I collapsed into Applejack's arms, my eyes having found fresh tears to cry. The next morning I led the family as well as the local undertakers to the spot where Pa lay. To say they were baffled as to how he became frozen solid would be an understatement. I kept the part about my powers a secret. I didn't want anyone outside of the family to know. Not really sure that they would have believed me anyway. It took 6 work ponies armed with hammers and chisels to free him from the ice and bring him back to town. The funeral took place a few days later. Members of the Apple family and even the Pear family showed up from every corner of Equestria in order to pay their respects, along with friends and neighbors. The service was held under a lone oak tree sitting on a hill overlooking the orchard. It was home to a private plot where the Apple family buried their loved ones after death. In its shade lay several simple stone markers inscribed with the names of the dead, going all the way back to the founding of Ponyville. "We are gathered here to say our final farewells to Brightmac," the town's priest last rites said as the casket was placed under the tree. It was a great deal larger than an average casket, having taken 2 pallbearers to carry it up to the hill. He was a simple stallion. Honest, loving, hardworking. A farmer like many in his family before him. He worked hard to provide an honest living for his family. To many who knew him, myself included, he was a close friend, the preacher continued. But to those closest to him, he was a loving son and a devoted father, and he will be missed. He leaves behind a mother and 4 children, grieving relatives, and many, many friends. We sat in the front row next to the casket. I was supposed to sit next to Apple Bloom, but she had been too distressed to go, so after the wake the night before, so Applejack decided to stay home with her. She'd offered to take me too, but I refused. Something inside me told me that I had to be there. To many, it seems he left us too soon. But I ask, as we gather here to pay our last respects, to not dwell on the unfortunate circumstances of his passing, but to remember the joy and the happiness he brought into each of our lives. The priest's eulogy cut through me like a knife. The familiar feeling of guilt began to bubble up inside of me. I didn't notice I was gripping my chair so tight that my hoof was denting the wood. How could I be so stupid? So stubborn. I only had to listen to his warning and all of this could have been prevented. But now, I hadn't, and the stallion who raised me my whole life was gone. The priest continued on for a few more minutes before inviting the family to say a few words on Pa's behalf. Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, Caramel Apple, Apple Strudel, Apple Tart, Bacon Apples, Apple Brochet, Apple Cinnamon Crisp, Cousin Brayburn, and even Great Grandpère. One by one, they told everyone how Pa had impacted their lives in a significant way. Finally, it was our turn. I sat up and followed Granny Smith and Big Mac to the front of the casket.
My son was a simple pony. He got up for chores every day at 5 in the morning and worked from sunup to sundown like his pa, and his pa before him.
Granny's tone was stoic, in the face of the loss of Pa betraying no hints of sadness or grief. Instead, she seemed tired in a way. Her eyes were those of a mare who had seen many loved ones enter and leave this world.
He was an honest, gentle soul who loved his family and would do anything to please us. He was kind and generous to everyone that he met, always there to cheer up his friends and neighbors with a joke or a warm smile. He brought many joys into our lives from the day he was born. He was a bright colt, never one tired for school. His teacher spoke very highly of him whenever we talked. I'll always remember that day I first met Pear Butter. I ain't ashamed to admit that I was angry as a wasp nest that she and my son were seeing each other, but over the years, I saw just how deep their love was for each other, how it all went. She gave us 4 wonderful grandchildren and a lifetime of wonderful memories before she passed on. Her death was hard on all of us, but Brightmac took it the hardest. He did his best to keep going, but I knew in my heart her passing had hurt him deeply. I like to think that he's up there with her now.
Pa's last words echoed in my head. Tell them that I love them. I'll be watching over them. I felt tears begin to well up in my eyes.
Apple Comet.
I looked up to see Granny looking over at me. Her expression softened as she knelt down to my level and embraced me.
It's okay. It's okay to cry here,
she said.
Look at me. I'm just barely holding it together myself.
I looked up to see 2 thin tears roll down her wrinkled cheeks.
Y'all can head back to the house anytime.
I dried my eyes and shook my head.
No, Granny. I'm not leaving until I've had a chance to say goodbye.
I stood up as tall as I could and wiped my eyes. Granny smiled and handed me a handkerchief from her saddlebag.
I think your pa would be mighty proud of that answer,
she said, gesturing to the casket. I wiped my eyes and placed the handkerchief in my jacket pocket before trotting up to the casket. I ran my hoof over the surface. The polished oak felt smooth to the touch.
Pa?
I said.
I just want to say thank you for taking me in when I had nowhere else to go. I'm sorry that I ran away like I did. I know you told me not to blame myself, but I can't help it. If I hadn't run back into the forest, then you'd probably still be here. But I gave you my word, and I intend to keep it. I'm not gonna run away for who I am anymore. I may have let you down. I may have let you down once, but I swear I will never let you down again. I'm gonna become a stallion that you can be proud of. I promise. Goodbye, Pa. I'm gonna miss you. Say hi to Ma for me when you get to Elysium.
That was very good, young Colt. I'm sure your father, wherever he is, would be very proud of you for standing up like that, the preacher said to me with a warm smile. Once the rest of the family had finished paying their last respects, it was time to lower the casket. And as we lay this pony to rest, we ask that the 3 judges in their wisdom look kindly upon him and judge him fairly, the preacher proclaimed as the casket was lowered into the earth. We ask that they grant him passage to the fields where there is no snow, nor heavy storms, nor rain, but where life is free of toil, sorrow, and pain. May the goddess Faust bless him on his journey to everlasting peace. And just like that, it was over. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I stayed up on the hill for a while after the mourners had left. I told Mac and Granny that I needed to be alone for a while. They hadn't said anything. They just nodded and went back to the house. Right, Mac. Beloved son, husband, and father. Birth, 9:55 a.m. Death, 9:95 a.m.
I'm sorry I couldn't save you, Pa. But I promise, I'll never let any pony down again.
I spent the next half hour looking over the names on the grave markers. The names went all the way back to the founding of Ponyville. One stone, in particular, caught my eye. The one laying right next to Pa's grave. Pear Butter. Beloved wife, daughter, and mother of 4. Birth, 959 a.m. Death, 990 a.m. A single tear ran down my cheek as I landed on the headstone. I was only a few months old when she died, but Pa told me that she loved as if I were her natural-born foal. She and Pa were finally reunited, for what it was worth.
Hey, Mom. It's Apple Comet. I know we didn't get to spend much time together, but I just wanted to say that I'm sorry about what happened to Pa. I didn't listen to him when I should have, and now... well, now he's with you, I guess. I can be happy that you can see each other again, but it still hurts inside.
As I stood there, it felt like a great weight was being lifted off of my shoulders. I guess there was some merit to what Granny said about the truth setting you free.
I've been going through some changes lately, and I'm guessing Pa's told you all about that. At first, I thought I was some kind of monster. Somebody who didn't belong. But Pa told me something before he died. He said that it was a gift and asked me to make a promise to never use it to hurt others. I'm gonna keep that promise, Ma. I promise I'm going to use my powers to help those in need. I'm gonna make you both proud of me. And just you wait and see.
When I got back to the house, the mood was mostly quiet. The family had crowded into the living room for snacks and conversation. Granny Smith sat on the couch next to Aunt and Uncle Orange.
Gertrude, dear, I can't imagine what you're going through right now.
Aunt Orange said as she placed her hoof on Granny's shoulder. Her voice was lacking its usual high society tone.
If there's anything Mosley or I can do for you, please do not hesitate to ask.
Granny took a sip of her tea, then set her cup aside on the table.
Thank you, Valencia,
she said softly.
I'll be sure to keep that in mind.
She looked up when she heard me shut the door.
Well, look who's finally back. Are y'all feeling any better?
She asked. I smiled and said,
I sure am, Granny. I'm feeling a lot better than I was this morning.
She smiled back at me and said,
I'm sure glad to hear that. There are apple fritters in the kitchen. Feel free to help yourself. Thanks, Granny. I could sure go for one right now,
I said as I trotted towards the kitchen.
Oh, and could you do me a favor and take one to your sister's room?
She asked me.
Poor Phil has been feeling down all day. I invited her to come down and sit with the rest of the family earlier, but she wasn't feeling up for it. Sure, Granny. I can do that,
I said before I headed back into the kitchen. The dining room table was set up like a buffet. Apple dishes of every variety sat out in pans, trays, and plates. Every apple had brought something to the wake to save Granny the trouble of cooking for every pony there.
Okay. Let's apple pies, apple cakes, apple tarts, apple strudel, apple cobbler, apple turnover, apple dumplings, apple crisps, apple cider, apple jam. What's this?
I picked up what I later found out to be an orange meringue.
Whatever it is, it looks fancy. Thanks, Aunt and Uncle Orange. Now, where's that apple Oh, bingo!
There they were. The batter-fried, cinnamon-coated golden deliciousness that was the Apple family's homemade fritters. This was surely what I needed to cheer my sister up. I picked up a plate with my teeth, taking extra care not to break Granny's good china, and placed 2 apple fritters on them.